Hello and welcome to the Right Fight podcast, where we discuss how to live a loving life. My name is Ted Slaughter, and I have the honor of sitting in for our host, Reg Lloyd, this week. And Kenny, today we're going to discuss chapter 12, which is titled "Loving in Your Influence." And I know you start off the story there in the book talking about a time that your brother got to meet President Bush Sr., which is a pretty cool story. Do you think you could maybe expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll start there. But before I do, real quick, Ted Slaughter, Colin Slaughter, hiding in the other room in there. But no, this wouldn't be happening without y'all. And with what you do with your business model, everything else. And I've worked with a lot of people on a lot of projects, and it's pretty rare to find someone that's relentlessly diligent as y'all are. I mean, I come in here and talk to the mic, and then y'all make all the other stuff happen. But I just want to say, if there's anybody out there needs help, have questions about podcasts, whatever it is y'all do, or maybe you could share real quickly how they could contact you if they wanted to do anything.
Yeah, well, I certainly appreciate that. This podcast was an idea that I approached you with probably maybe a little less than a year ago, and we just kind of started talking about ideas. And for us, so we have a production company called Atlas Recording Company, and we do all different forms of audio production. We work on records for bands and musicians, but then we kind of had this idea of, I got to do some work for you in the past with recording the audiobook version of The Right Fight, which honestly was just kind of life-changing for me. Just, I read through the book probably 3 or 4 times in that process with editing and just working on it. And, just found myself challenged constantly, convicted constantly, which I needed. And so the thought of, just kind of after seeing your stuff on social media and some of the conversations that you have that usually kind of expound upon some of the concepts in the book. But obviously with social media, you're usually confined to like a 60-second window of time. And so the thought with the podcast was, man, what if we take these really, really powerful concepts in the book, and what if we create like a long format conversation where you can kind of just say whatever you want and expound. But that was our first podcast to start with. And honestly, it's just been a massive blessing. It's been kind of a cool challenge for us as a business where we do a lot of, like I said, musical recordings. But it kind of helped create a whole different world for us with getting into, kind of the commercial audio side of things with podcast production. And so, obviously if there's anyone out there that enjoys this platform, kind of enjoys the way that we do this format, that would be great. You can contact us on our website, which is atlasrecording.co, or look us up on social media. We'd love to help you. But obviously today we're excited to jump into the content, and explore what it looks like to be loving in your influence.
Yeah. Well, thanks for doing that. And I know I just kind of tossed that at you. Didn't tell you it was coming, but I really appreciate everything y'all are doing. And I wish you great continued success, and I hope we're a part of it. And thanks for encouraging me to do the podcast. Ted really did. I mean, that's where it came from. I say, man, why don't you do a podcast? I'm like, what's that?
But it's definitely a platform that people need. People need this. And I think it's been cool. You've shared with us some of the, comments and people messaging you, and just how I think you've even gone as far as like out of state. You've had some people approach you and say that they were listening to the podcast and it's made an impact. And so that's honestly the most rewarding part of it, is to see that, the goal from the very beginning was that this becomes something that impacts people's daily lives, which, like I said, even just in working in the audiobook, producing the podcast, like I know it's been very challenging in a great way for us. And I believe for all the listeners as well.
Awesome. Challenge for me too. But yeah, jumping into my brother meeting President Bush. So you'd have to know my brother, but I'll try to help you know him a little bit here. So he goes to this, he first of all, he likes going and doing nice stuff. I call him Metro. He's my Metro brother. He's always dressed nice. I'm in my ball cap, my T-shirt. I look like his driver or something. But no, he goes to this nice steakhouse over in Houston, and he's eating there, and he's telling me the story. And so he says, they go in to sit down to eat, and there's a lot of, scuttlebutt going on in the back corner of the restaurant. He doesn't know what's going on, but if you know my brother, he will know what's going on pretty shortly, even if he has to just walk over there and see whatever. So anyway, he kind of kicks around, and he figures out that the former president at that time was over there eating dinner with his family and his wife. And we make the dog tags with scriptures on them, and then it was Bush Jr., George W., who had read the scripture off the dog tag, off the Shield of Strength to the nation in a Memorial Day speech. And so Gabe's like, man, he wants to get to him and give his family one. He has some with him. So he goes back there, and of course the Secret Service is guarding. They're in a separate room, and they're guarding the room. There must have been more than one entry though. But so he goes to the Secret Service, and he's like, "Hey, man, I'd like to talk to the president. And is that possible?" And they're like, "No, that's definitely not a good idea." And so he doesn't know what to do. He goes and he sits down. Well, this is what you have to know, my brother, but. He decides, Secret Service said he shouldn't talk to the president, but maybe he should ask the waiter. So he asked the waiter, "Hey, does he come in here often?" And he's like, "Yeah, he comes in here all the time. He's really a nice guy, And he says, "Well, you think he would talk to me?" He's like, "Yeah, man, you ought to just go talk to him." And so my brother's with Secret Service is still there, so he finds another way in. Yeah, slips into the room and approaches the president, puts his hand on his shoulder, and I'm like, he survived it, But here's where I'm going with this. He gives him one of the Shields of Strength, and then the president. Apparently, what happens from there is the president asks him to go give one to his wife, and then other family members, and he has a little conversation with them. And now my brother's driving home, and he's explaining this to me. And to my brother, it's like President Bush was the greatest man he had ever met. And that wasn't, I was like, what did he do? Like, I keep thinking, what did this guy do that he had this kind of an impact? What's rocking him so much? Because he was it just meant so much to him. And in the end, he really didn't do a lot. I mean, it was like he gave him his attention. He was grateful that he showed up. And so I'm thinking, why did it have, if any normal guy would have been in that room, and my brother does this for other people too, not just the president, he gives these things away all the time. If they would have given him the same attention that the president did, it wouldn't have been as significant. And then it crossed my mind that, what if the president had blown him off just a little bit? And my thought was he would have probably, instead of thinking he was the nicest, greatest, most kind, everything he had to say guy he had ever met, and the whole family was, it would have probably been he was the biggest jerk he had ever met. And so from there, I'm thinking, I'm trying to explain this in the book, is that it's the level of influence that he had. So to whom much is given, much is required. And it just turned a light on for me to think, okay, where we have a lot of influence, we have a lot of responsibility. And then from there, I'm trying to think, where do I have a lot of influence? And where do I need to accept the responsibility? And I'm not the president of the United States. I don't know a lot of people. I don't have all that kind of influence. But there are people in my life that I do have that kind of influence on. And so then I'm asking, who is that? Who are the people that I have that kind of influence on, and how do I treat them? And unfortunately, what I found in examining myself was that the people that I have the most influence on are the people who are closest to me. And the people that I have the responsibility to love the most, like my own family. And then what I find is that, unfortunately, those are the people that I actually tend to treat worse, not better. So, and I don't mean I'm terrible husband or terrible dad or whatever all those things. I just mean excuse me. I just mean that if you see me out and about, if you see me on my social media page, if you see me on my Instagram videos, if you, wherever it is you see me, if you followed me home and into my home, unfortunately, you wouldn't see the same, especially then. I'm getting better. Sure. Okay. But I mean, and I've said it before here, my wife she loves me, so she tunes me up. And she's the first one to tell me, can you talk about all that love stuff, but just look at you. I mean, look at you right now. And I'm like, oh, wow. Yeah. I don't really want to look at me right now. And so, but just as an example of that and how I was failing to do that in my own home and how I needed to take on the responsibility of doing a better job of loving my family and how this plays out. Not long after all that went down and I'm contemplating these things, I come home one evening, I've had a real busy day at work, and I also have a lot I need to get done that evening. I might even been working on the book. I think I was working on the book, The Right Fight, and I was trying to get this stuff written down in the evenings, and I'm trying to get it written down while it's fresh in my mind and my heart because I'm afraid I'm going to lose it. And then it was just one of those days. But I also know that there's this air conditioner vent that's in the hallway. It's the air intake for our main air conditioner. And, they got all these little vents on them. And over time, the moisture and everything, ours had become rusted. And it was looking terrible. Tammy had been on me for a while, about changing it and way longer than she should have had to be. And so I finally bought one. Then it sat in the garage for months. But, like this was the evening I definitely had to change the air conditioning vent too. And I had no idea how to change an air conditioning vent. It's not rocket science, but I was thinking there's probably going to be more to it than there actually was.
Always.
Yeah. And it's never, even if it's easy, I got the wrong part, it's going to turn into something. So, I go to start working on this air conditioning vent. I got this other stuff to do. I had this bad day, and Kennedy's like 2 years old, and I love spending time with him. But here he comes, and he sees me tinkering with it, trying to figure out where the screws are to get it out of the wall. And he's like, "Dad, can I help?" And my first thought was, no. Like, we're not turning a 20-minute job into 2 hours. There's just no way. And so I'm gonna come up with a distraction, a diversion, whatever it is. But I'm trying to love in my influence. This is my influence, and love is gonna cost me something. And what am I gonna do? And then on top of all of that, Ted, I had just met this guy who worked for a company that we were having some problems with. They were surveying some property we have, and it's a long story there. But this guy came in as a mediator, and he worked for the other company. I didn't like him at first. Okay. And so he was pulling for them. Anyway, but we got to be friends throughout the process. And one of the things he told me that was sticking in my head and poking out of my head whenever Kennedy's trying to get me to do something, he said, if your kids ever want to help you do something, let them. He said, it's the best way for them to learn. It's the best way for you to spend time with them. He said, it's always going to be harder. It's always going to take more time, all of that stuff, but you'll never regret it. So this guy had just told me all that. Now Kenny wants to help with air conditioning, and I don't have time. But I'm just like, man, okay, Lord. So Kennedy, sure, man, what do you think we should do here? Because I'm thinking he has no idea. But what does he do? He starts looking around. He looks up and looks up inside the vent and finds the screws. And I'm like, how'd you know to look there? And he gets his screwdriver out and he starts to loosen them up. And he pulls 2 of the screws, and then he gets distracted and he's gone. And he took up probably 5-10 minutes of my time max. And that may sound simple, but it taught me a lesson, and it showed me that, from that point forward, anytime they wanted to help me do something, even if it took more time, I took the time to do it, and our relationships have been better for it. Yeah. So much better for it. So loving in your influence means you have a responsibility to consider who you have the most influence over, whose lives are most impacted by your decisions and by your selfishness. And are you willing to do what you believe is best for them, even when it's harder, even when it takes longer? And then when you aren't, because I'm not so often, do we have the courage to go back and say we're sorry?
Yeah.
You know, and then, hey, let's try again.
I think that's a big one, because I can say, so I have 4 kids, and I know that there's a lot of times, just like you, where, in fact, even today, ironically, while preparing for the show and just kind of going over some of these notes, you know, I'm in a rush. I'm trying to get out the door, and, you know, my daughter's asking me, you know, will you sit down and eat lunch with me? And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I of course I want to in theory, but I also have a limited amount of time. And it's funny how it seems like, you know, while you're trying to teach the lesson or present the lesson, or you're kind of, God's been dealing with you about this subject matter, and then there's always an opportunity to put that to the test. Like it's not a coincidence that as you're learning this theme, this subject, God's working on your heart, and then He just always likes to give you the opportunity to actually put it into practice. And it's funny how that's still challenging whenever we experience that moment.
Yeah, and I think that what really makes it so, love, when someone knows we love them, when they know we're trying, when they know that we care about them, when they know we're giving our best shot, and and sometimes we just can't, you know, sometimes circumstances just don't allow it. Sometimes we mess up and we say we're sorry, but whenever they understand why, whenever that core reason comes through, I think that's where all the wonderful stuff happens. That's where, even though they didn't get what they wanted, even though they got disappointed, even though whatever it was, they still don't feel like they're not loved. They still understand their love. They still understand why we're doing what we're doing. We're okay. So in other words, I guess what I'm trying to say is, we don't have to get love perfect.
Yeah.
We need to get our why right.
Yeah.
And then all the stuff in between, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but that's not what matters most. Yeah. You know, it's so whenever you can't have lunch because you have to do something, when I can't let Kennedy help with the vent, you know, because it's just absolutely, it's not possible, whatever, that doesn't have to be life-changing. But whenever I blow him off because I don't have time to deal with him, and then whenever I continue to do that and I don't have the courage to come back to self-examine and come back and say, I'm sorry, you know, and then when that becomes the pattern in my life, which is kind of that's where I want to default to all the time, then over time, love starts dying in the relationships I have with the people that I have the greatest responsibility to love, the people that I have the influence with. And because we're around the people, our family specifically, more often than anyone else, there's a lot more opportunities for mess ups. Sure. You know, and we're not putting on our best show, our best look when we're around them. We let our guards down. We do all these things. So there is a lot more opportunities for mess ups, but that's also a lot more opportunities for repentance, and a lot more opportunities for our hearts to be truly known and truly seen, or for sure our intentions and our desires, and that we really do love our family, that we really do consider them before ourselves. And if we just do that, and we don't get all the details right, it's okay. Yeah. You know, it really is. I mean, I don't think anybody gets it just right, but if someone is loved, they know they're loved. But whenever we...
Well, wouldn't you say that, since obviously, you know, in this discussion about love, I'm sure it's clear to everyone, love is not something that you just, you know, it just happens to you overnight. It's not something that you fall into. If you fall into it, you can fall out of it. And the same is true with our families, that we become love. That's the goal, is that we would become the love of Christ through experiencing the love of Christ. And I think that, you know, like you said, like our families being the ones that are closest to us, they're the ones that are also going to see the most moments where we don't look like love. But I think, wouldn't you say that part of that process, especially with our kids, when our kids, you know, see that we did something that was unloving, don't you think that there's immense value in them seeing us becoming love, where we can go back to them and say, hey, let me explain, like that's part of the why. Let me explain why this was wrong. As a parent, you know, some people take the parenting approach that, you know, well, because I said so, and you don't question me, I'm perfect, or that kind of thing. But like, I think there's so much value when our kids are actually able to see, hey, mommy and daddy, man, they got it wrong today, but they came back to me and humbled themselves and said, hey, I want to explain something. I think that what I did was not right, but let me explain why I want to do better the next time.
Yeah. I mean, that's an incredible point. And there's two ways that goes. And it's just that simple. I'm the one who messed up. And when I'm the one who messed up, then I have a responsibility to come back and say that I'm sorry. And I'm afraid that if I do that, I'm going to appear weak, or it's going to be easier to bowl over me, or whatever we're afraid of. But when I get up the guts to come back and do it, what I actually am is strong. And then I model for my own children how to handle it whenever they mess up, because they will. And the other side of that coin is that somebody else in the family messes up. Mom messes up and how she treats me, but then I protect her anyway. I protect her image. I protect her, I protect how my children see her, or so whatever. So we have a responsibility when we mess up to own our mistake, to come back and say we're sorry. And then we model for our children how they should do the same thing, which is going to bless their life. And then when somebody else messes up, how we protect that person. We don't throw them under the bus. Our goal, we still love them even when they do. Then we model for our children how to do this, how to live the same selfless life. So so the mistakes and the blunders, because we're closer, do create more opportunities. But if we don't seize them, they'll seize us. If we allow fear to seize us, and our family gets torn apart instead of drawn and glued tighter together.
It really creates a culture of grace in your house, like real grace, right? Because some people think grace, means that you can do whatever you want to do and God still loves you, which obviously he does love you. But, the Bible talks about that grace does not give us a license to sin. The real form of grace is when we experience the grace that God gives to us, that inspires repentance, right? And that shows us, well, if he would still love me even though I did this, then I don't want to do that again. I don't want to abuse that love. Rather, I want to be transformed more so into his image. And I think when we, just like what you said, when we can do that, when we create that culture in our own home where our kids know, our spouses know, hey, you don't have to be perfect, right? This is a safe place. Like, you don't have to be flawless for me to love you, or or else I'm going to withhold affection from you. But rather, in this family, we're good about recognizing and humbling ourselves when we do get it wrong, because that's part of the process of becoming love. It's not that we can abuse that and be fear-led and make decisions that are selfish and just what's best for our own immediate need, but rather we're going to create an environment, a safe environment. Kind of like you also talk about, you can feel the difference when you walk into a home and you want to sit down and be comfortable versus when you walk into a home where you can tell that there's this selfishness in the air where, this person's only out to get what's best for them and not for me. But we can combat that in our own homes by creating that experience of repentance. Wouldn't you say that's correct and that's important?
Yeah, well, and grace is not permission to be selfish. It's not, love is not, it's not okay with anything you do. It's only okay with what's best for you, and what's best for you is that you also love, and you're not loving if you're taking what is grace. If you think you can take advantage of grace, you really can't. Yeah, if you really understand grace and what God did for you, the last thing you ever want to do is take advantage of that. And if you do, you're going to be failing to love. And when you fail to love God and you fail to love other people, you might hurt other people. You certainly don't change God, but you're on the path of really wrecking yourself. So I don't know. I don't understand the argument that, I think it's a misunderstanding of love to argue that if you have grace, you can just do what you want. Because if you just do what you want, you don't know love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put that. And I think that that's probably one of the greatest misunderstandings about the love of Jesus in our culture these days, is thinking that it's all, which we've kind of talked about this in previous episodes, that it's all this system based off of works, and I do this so that I get that. And but the reality is, to understand the love of God is to understand the grace of God, because that's how he displayed his love for us, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And I think that a practical way that we become love in his example is that we lay down ourselves for our families, for our kids. And that looks like those micro moments, doesn't it? Not just the big things, but it looks like those moments of sitting down and taking just a little bit of extra time with our kids, when it'd be so much more convenient just to, work quickly and efficiently. But we'll probably never know the impact that those moments have on our kids, the same way that we have those moments and those memories with our own parents and family members.
Yep. That's right. Got to give you time, man. Do what's best for them. That's the bottom line. What is truly best for your children. Sometimes it's best that you go to work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And say goodbye and give them a hug, and you can't play today.
Yeah.
But when you can, just actually spend time with them, this is priceless.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Well, I think that probably wraps up our discussion for today. This was a great episode, and, as always, very much convicting and hopefully life-changing for everyone listening. But until next time, trust God's word no matter what.
Keep your eyes on the horizon.
See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Right Fight podcast. Make sure to check out Kenny's book, The Right Fight, for more on how to live a loving life. It's available on their website, shieldsofstrength.com, Audible, and all digital platforms. If you have any questions for the podcast, you can email support@shieldsofstrength.com and put podcast as the subject. And make sure to follow Kenny on Instagram and TikTok @JohnKennedyVaughn. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.